SITREP World Briefing for June 2, 2026. Russia launched a large overnight barrage of missiles and drones against Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, killing at least 14 people, wounding more than 100, and leaving residents trapped in damaged buildings as emergency crews searched through debris. In Kyiv, civilians crowded into the metro system and other shelters, while strikes caused fires and structural damage in the capital. The attack hit far beyond the capital, with reports of deaths across multiple cities. Among the victims identified by officials were an 8-year-old boy and a woman pulled from the rubble of an apartment block. The breadth of the strike, described as involving hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles, fits Russia's pattern of using massed salvos to overwhelm defenses and force Ukraine to disperse scarce interceptor systems across a wide geography. For Kyiv, the renewed bombardment reinforced the central role of underground infrastructure in civilian survival more than 2 years after Russia's full-scale invasion. Residents again used the capital's metro as an improvised bomb shelter, while firefighters and rescue teams responded to fresh blazes and damaged buildings above ground. The latest wave also demonstrated that Russia retains the capacity to hit Ukraine's political center and several regional cities in a single night. Israel escalated military operations in southern Lebanon by warning residents of Nabatea, Lebanon, to leave their homes ahead of planned strikes, after a U.S.-backed partial ceasefire that both Israel and Hezbollah had accepted. Nabatea is one of the main urban centers in southern Lebanon, and an order aimed at civilians there points to the likelihood of broader military action in an area closely linked to Hezbollah's support networks and cross-border operations. The United Nations called on all sides to respect the ceasefire, warning that Israeli advances into Lebanon risked derailing a broader diplomatic effort tied to the regional crisis and U.S.-Iran peace talks. A cessation of hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah is being treated as a necessary condition for any wider de-escalation, because sustained combat in southern Lebanon could open additional fronts and harden positions in parallel negotiations. The latest warning to Nabatea's residents illustrated the narrow scope of the current arrangement. It has not stopped Israeli military action in southern Lebanon, nor has it ended exchanges with Hezbollah. Southern Lebanese cities sit near the main theater of cross-border hostilities, where military movements can quickly trigger civilian displacement and diplomatic fallout. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said she had formed a new center-left coalition minority government in Copenhagen after months of negotiations, securing a third term for her social democratic leadership. The agreement followed inconclusive elections in March, which left parties bargaining over how to assemble a workable majority arrangement in Denmark's fragmented parliament, where minority governments are common, but still need dependable support to pass budgets, welfare measures, and legislation. Frederiksen's deal gives Denmark continuity at a time when the country remains involved in European debates over defense, migration, energy security, and economic competitiveness. A third term is politically notable in Denmark because coalition building usually forces compromises among several parties, and extended post-election talks can expose how difficult it is to balance fiscal discipline, social spending, and climate goals. By concluding the negotiations now, Frederiksen has moved from caretaker uncertainty to a defined governing arrangement, even though a minority coalition will still have to negotiate issue by issue with other parliamentary forces. The United States said Israel and Hezbollah had agreed to dial back fighting in Lebanon after President Donald Trump held talks linked to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the cross-border conflict. Washington presented the move as an effort to reduce a dangerous escalation along the Israel-Lebanon frontier, where exchanges of fire have raised the risk of a broader regional war involving Beirut, northern Israel, and other actors already pulled into months of overlapping crises in the Middle East. The announcement did not bring an immediate stop to combat. Israel carried out strikes in South Lebanon, and Hezbollah fired into northern Israel after Trump's statement. The Israel-Hezbollah front has become one of the most combustible theaters in the region. Miscalculation near the border can quickly draw in Lebanese territory beyond the south, pressure Netanyahu's government in Jerusalem and test Washington's ability to translate private diplomacy into a durable military pause. The United States said nuclear talks with Iran were still moving forward after regional tensions surged. The statement came as Tehran threatened to widen the war and linked pressure on the Strait of Hormuz to the crisis, a warning with global consequences because the narrow waterway is one of the world's most important routes for oil and gas shipments and a central pressure point in any confrontation involving Iran and the United States. Washington's insistence that diplomacy remains alive is significant because the latest escalation had cast doubt on whether mediated contacts could survive another regional shock. The door remained open for talks with the Islamic Republic after Tehran signaled an end to mediated negotiations. For policymakers in Washington, the stakes extend beyond the nuclear file itself to maritime security, energy markets, U.S. military posture in the Gulf, and the risk that a breakdown in talks could trigger a broader confrontation. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo spread further on June 2nd as the World Health Organization stepped up its appeal for international support and widened its response with Congolese authorities and frontline medical teams. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus met President Felix Tshisekedi to discuss the outbreak, while health agencies warned that transmission was moving beyond the initial cluster and that the epidemic could prove larger than early case counts suggested. For Congo, where past Ebola emergencies have repeatedly strained clinics, laboratories, and transport networks, the immediate challenge is to move staff, protective equipment, and surveillance teams quickly enough to stay ahead of new infections. At treatment centers in DR Congo, health workers are relying on supportive care and strict infection control procedures because the outbreak is being driven by the Bundibugyo species of Ebola, for which there are currently no approved drugs that specifically target it. Medical teams are treating patients while also trying to protect themselves through layered safety routines, including protective clothing, controlled patient handling, and tightly managed ward procedures. Those precautions are central to the response because Ebola spreads through contact with infected bodily fluids, meaning every suspected case requires careful isolation, testing, and follow-up work by trained staff in facilities that can maintain biosecurity standards. The longer-term medical response is also widening, with 3 Ebola vaccines now in development by IAVI, Moderna, and the University of Oxford, as scientists and public health officials try to build tools better suited to the current outbreak. That work will not solve Congo's immediate needs, however, because vaccine development takes time, and the present emergency depends on faster case detection, safer clinical care, and enough funding to sustain operations in affected areas. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has extensive experience with Ebola control from earlier outbreaks, but the present spread has shown that each species can pose different medical challenges, making WHO's request for additional aid and an expanded field response especially urgent. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.